and welcome to ProWritingAid 101 for business writers. I'm Micah McGuire, ProWritingAid's Growth Marketing Manager, and today you will notice I am not joined by Tom Wilde. So Tom actually had a time conflict as we had to postpone today's session. So I am actually going to be running the walkthrough for today. On today's agenda, we are going to be covering the most important reports and features for business writers, and this is going to include the real-time checker and goals sidebar, the summary report, the readability report, the style report, the sticky sentences report, and a brand new feature that basically is going to help all of this readability stuff come together, and that is our rephrase tool. So we'll be covering all of those and possibly also the sentence length report as well. And then if we have time, because the goal is to have you guys in and out of here in about 40 to 45 minutes or so, we're also going to go over a little bit about our style guides and a little bit about our Chrome extension as well. Now, of course, we want this to be driven by what you guys want to know about the tool. So if at any point during the walkthrough you have questions, please submit them via the Q&A box. Especially today, as I am working on my own and won't have somebody else to monitor that with me, basically throw those in the Q&A box. That will make sure that I do not miss any questions when we do get to our Q&A, which will have 5 to 10 minutes at the end of today's session 4. I think that covers all of our housekeeping for today. So I am going to go ahead and jump right in. Just one moment to get my screen together here. Okay. All right, so today we are starting off in the ProWritingAid web editor. And the reason for this is because the user interface that you see here is going to be really, really similar across all of the apps and extensions that we have available. We do have a variety of extensions, including our browser extensions for Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and Edge. We also have a new desktop app called Everywhere, which is going to allow you to use ProWritingAid in apps on your desktop, and this includes Slack, Discord, WhatsApp, Pages, PowerPoint, and Word as well, of course. That is in addition to our Word and Outlook extension for Windows. So if you want a little extra functionality, you can try out Everywhere. It is available for Windows right now, and then we do have a beta available for Mac. So Mac users, we are working on getting the full version rolled out for you, but if you would like to give it a trial run, you are more than welcome to download that at any time on our site. I'll try to include the links to that at the end of our session today. But again, the user interface in all of these apps is going to look very, very similar to this, which is why we start here, is because this, if you're comfortable with the web editor, then generally you'll be comfortable with pretty much every other app that we use. So the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is this settings tab in the center of the top of the page here. And there are a couple of important drop downs that you'll see here, and this includes an English dialect selector. We do support UK, US, Australian, and Canadian English, and any one of these settings will basically monitor for certain wordings and spellings within those dialects. So if I am using US English, if I spell color with an O-U-R instead of just an O-R, then it's going to flag it and say, that's the British version. Would you like to use the American version instead? So it will make that flag available. Now, general English means that all comers are accepted. So it means that basically it doesn't matter what kind of spellings or dialect you use here, it's going to not mark any of it. In this case, I am in the US, so I am going to pick US English here. And I am going to change my document type over. So you can see here we have lots of different document types, and there are quite a few under this business section. In this case, I am actually dealing with a memo, so I am going to change it back. And there's good reason to change this, as I'm going to get to in a few minutes. But right now, I just want you aware that we do have this ability to change that document type. So popping back to our reports tab, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the real-time checker. So you can see after I have the real-time checker on, those numbers are reporting as it is finding suggestions and finding corrections that it would like for me to make. And you can see I get these highlights. Now, if I want to start accepting suggestions, all I have to do is hover, and I can accept that suggestion by clicking anywhere in this teal box. Or I can actually accept and advance to the next suggestion by clicking on this downward facing arrow. So if I click here, then I am actually automatically going to advance on to this next suggestion. Now, over here to the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see a sidebar. This is our improvements and our goals sidebar. In this case, the improvement sidebar is going to work in the same order that your corrections are highlighted here. So they both work in basically chronological order in the document. And I can either work through just by highlighting, clicking, just like I showed there, or I can work through by highlighting and accepting here and just work down the list. You'll also notice as I scroll, my suggestions in the improvement sidebar are going to change to match what is actually within the editor on my screen right here. Now, all these different highlight colors do actually signify different things, which if I go to this filter button on this right-hand side of the screen, then you can see my grammar suggestions are all in blue, my style suggestions are all in yellow, spelling corrections are in red, and passive voice suggestions are in purple. And I can filter any one of those out. So let's say I don't want to see my style suggestions. Then there, all I can see is my grammar and my spelling. At the moment, I don't have a passive voice suggestion in that bit of text that is currently on the screen. If I want to get those back, all I have to do is check. So essentially you can mix and match, and this makes it really great if you are trying to deal with overwhelm. So if you've got a document that has a lot of corrections and you're feeling like you're getting a bit overwhelmed trying to edit that document, then use this filter tool for sure. It's basically going to help a lot with a lot of that stress and a lot of that overwhelm, because it's going to cut down on the number of suggestions that you're going to be seeing at once. So again, I can either work through on this hover, point, and click, or work through here. And you'll notice that I do have these 2 points, disable rule versus ignore. And this is if you run into any suggestions that are incorrect. You feel that they are not a good match. We do suggest everyone use the ignore button rather than the disable rule button, because the ignore button is going to mean that the program marks that suggestion as, okay, that was an incorrect suggestion. I just need to ignore it and not present it again. And it is going to save that. So after you've hit ignore for a suggestion, it shouldn't pop back up again. So you won't see that again as you're working on the document. Disable rule, on the other hand, is going to mean that it disables that rule for your entire writing set on ProWritingAid. So if you disable, say, like the passive voice, then that means you're no longer going to see any passive voice suggestions, no matter what document you're working on within ProWritingAid. So that is a profile-wide setting. We really suggest people avoid using this, because if you do want it reinstated, it does take contacting our support team, chatting with them to get it re-enabled for your profile. So just much easier to use that ignore. And then if you actually find any errors, because we do have a tendency sometimes to have issues like any other AI program, we don't always get it perfectly correct, then you may report that as incorrect, and it's going to provide a place for you to provide a little bit of feedback to our NLP team, and they will get on getting that corrected. So that covers our real-time checker. And I'm now going to talk a little bit about our goals sidebar. So you'll remember I mentioned that document type being important. Well, this goals sidebar is actually where that comes into play, because as you can see here, like the name suggests, we are giving you goals for your writing. So you can see in this case, this gray bar here is an indicator of where I need to have this button. So in this case, I am outside of my range. Therefore, the button is in this gold color. Whereas over here on my style guide compliance, I am within range. So therefore, the button or slider is green. And here you can see I actually need to be at 80% or above for this grammar or spelling check. So I'm down here at 36%, which means I have a lot of corrections I need to go ahead and make during in this document to start getting that up to goals. Now, that might not seem like such a big deal at first, but then if you look at changing the document type, this is where this becomes really interesting. So I'm just going to say, for example, that if I was writing a sales email and this document was a sales email rather than a memo, I changed that over. Then I'm going to give this a second. You can start seeing, I see these personalized goals that include this customer focus score, we, you linkers, positivity, word count, question count, spam phrase count. So all of those would be specific, important goals for someone writing a sales email. And that is why we always suggest to you guys, definitely make sure that you are changing your document type to match what you are writing, because it's going to give you a more personalized experience and it's going to give you a stronger overall overview of what you need to do to improve that document. Because of some of those specialized goals, basically, if you had it set to, let's say, general business, you might not know that you don't have enough we, you linkers, or you don't have, or you have a too high of a spam count phrasing in that. So therefore, we highly suggest making this change anytime you are writing a different style of document. So I'm going to go ahead and return this to memo. Now, this setup with using the real-time checker and using the goals sidebar often works really, really well. And I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of extra suggestion selections here. So I'm going to go ahead and correct there and correct here. But this is really great for documents that are generally shorter and or documents that you are editing while you are writing. So let's talk, 1 to 2 pages, things like that. Whereas if you have a document that's more along the lines of 50, 75, maybe even 100 pages, or a document that you wrote a long time ago, but you're now needing to go back and edit, it can sometimes be cumbersome to go through this kind of point, hover, click, or go through this list as you would in the improvement sidebar. It can just feel like very overwhelming, and you might not know where your document needs the most work first. Well, this is where our summary report actually comes into play, because what our summary report is going to do, I'm going to pull that up now. This is going to give you a view of where your document looks good versus places that your document may need some work. And on top of that, it's going to give you even more in-depth explanations of what each one of our reports actually means. So you're going to get some extra visualizations, you're going to get some extra explanations there. It's just a really good tool for understanding how each of these reports is important to having good writing. Now, you'll notice at the top, we do have these key scores, grammar, spelling, and style. And that is because across the board, no matter what type of writing you're doing, because we have a lot of different types of writers. We have students writing for school. We have creative writers who are working on their novels. We have writers like you who are writing for work. Across the board, though, these scores are going to be important no matter what you're writing. Nobody wants to have a grammar error or a spelling error in their work whenever they're sending it off, especially if it's going somewhere public. And the style score is going to provide you with suggestions. It's going to make your writing easier to understand overall. So that's why we always have these 3 scores at the top. Now, if I scroll down, I can see here, this is where my document actually looks really good. So I'm fine on my sentence length, my readability grades, passive voice, all of that good stuff. So fantastic. That's always good to see. It's nice to get a little bit of a pat on the back for all the things you're doing right. However, I do need to work on some of these key indicators, including, again, that grammar, spelling, and style, and then our business jargon and our glue index. Now, just to show you the power of this summary report, I am going to go up to a couple of these reports that we're doing well on, show you a couple of the visuals that we put throughout this summary report. So if I click here on the sentence length, it's going to take me to a visualization of my document. So you can see here, this is the sentence length of every single one of these sentences in my document. So you can see here, I've got a couple of really, really long sentences that are up here at above 30 words. I have a little bit of an explanation about how sentence length is important to good writing and how basically varying our sentence length helps with keeping our readers engaged. And again, I've got that visual there. If I want to go up and basically check out one of our other reports, let's say I want to take a look at readability. I can see here that the majority of my paragraphs are easy to read, but I do have roughly, let's say about 20% that are either slightly difficult or very difficult combined. So basically that's paragraphs that are a little bit harder to read. So in this case, let's say I just want to start off with readability. I want to start off with a report that I feel like I'm going to have an easier time getting advancing with. So I'm going to close out the summary report. Hop over to our readability report. Now, the readability report is something we like to call an advisory report, which means it's going to give you information on difficult versus not difficult to read. So you can see here, I have my overall Flesch Reading Ease score. I have my Flesch Kincaid grade. That Flesch Kincaid grade is simply taking that Flesch Reading Ease score and converting it into a grade level, reading level grade, which means that basically for Flesch Kincaid, we're looking for somewhere around a 6th to 10th grade reading level. This does not mean that you are trying to write to a bunch of middle schoolers. It simply means that good writing, easy to understand writing, generally falls in that level, which means that basically if those 6th to 10th graders can understand it, any reader you're directing it at will have an easier time understanding it, and it will be an easier read for them. Flesch Reading Ease tends to be if we are looking at a difficult to read paragraph like down here, it's more in the range of 40 to 50, whereas slightly difficult to read, as you can see here in yellow, is more along the 50 to 60 range. And all of these reading ease scores are actually calculated by a couple of things. This is both the number of syllables per word as well as the length of your sentences. So again, this is an advisory report, meaning that it is not going to make recommendations on how to change your readability. So you may have a case where maybe we're looking at this paragraph and going, okay, well, how could I make this easier to read? Do I have any words that I might substitute a simpler, simpler, shorter word for that might change my reading? The reading ease score? Do I have a way that maybe I can break sentences up so they're shorter, perhaps? And sometimes this is easy to do, and sometimes this is a little tricky. And this is where some of our other reports can come in handy. So I always kind of say that the triad of readability reports is going to be a readability report to figure out where your document actually needs work, then your style report, your sticky sentences report, and now our rephrase tool. So I'm going to start off with style report just so you guys can see what I'm talking about with how these changes are important. And you can see here, I have a lot of different things that the style report checks for. Now, this is not like our grammar and spelling report, where this is like a right or wrong. The grammar is either correct or incorrect. The spelling is either correct or incorrect. This is basically a gray area. This style report presents things that are not necessarily wrong, but if you change them, it will lead to an easier read for your readers. It'll make it easier for your audience to understand. So oftentimes one of the biggest business writing sins can be passive voice. We have a tendency to overuse this because it feels like it's making something sound more important than it actually is, because what you're doing there is actually kind of hiding the subject of the sentence. And it just actually, in actuality, makes it harder for your reader to understand. Here I have a passive voice suggestion. Here you can see I've actually got some rewording suggestions, and this is based on our rephrase tool that I could select here. Now, this is also a good time to point out that because passive voice is something that does actually have uses that are correct. If you are looking to understand any of these concepts better, all you have to do is hit this golden I at any time. And that is going to bring up our in-app learning tool. So in this case, you can see that I have an explanation of passive voice, how I can change it to active voice, cases where passive voice is actually correct. And down here, we do have multimedia for some of our suggestions. So in this case, I actually have a video that is using Jackie Chan to explain the passive voice that I can watch. So it's basically just a great tool to help you get a grasp on some of these concepts if you need to brush up on them. But in this case, I am just going to go ahead and make that change. So you can see already I am finding ways to make this easier on my reader just by making some of these suggestions. So I could go through and work through all of these passive voice suggestions. I could delete some of this business jargon, basically in the loop. We would much prefer to suggest something else there. And then I have my readability enhancements. And this is where, again, this style report begins to really mesh really well with that readability report. Because if I make some of these changes, so instead we'll speed up. So let's just go ahead and make a few here. Also, let's see, that's the PowerPoint design. I can actually get rid of that. So I can just click through and accept some of these suggestions. In this case, I probably will ignore that suggestion because Quick Start appears to be the brand name. And then start to get instead. There we go. So I've already made some readability changes there that's going to increase that Flesch Kincaid and that Flesch Reading Ease score that you see under the readability report. So I could go through and make all of those changes, but let's say I make all of those changes in the style report and I'm still having difficulty with some of my paragraphs. Well, then we can go over to the sticky sentences report. And the sticky sentences report is basically a company favorite because this is something that is unique to ProWritingAid. Sticky sentences are going to be sentences that have 40% or above of glue words. And what these quote unquote glue words are is they're the 200 most common words in the English language. And a lot of this is articles and prepositional phrases that help us make sense of the sentence, but it actually doesn't give any meaning. So if we kind of go by the example of if we were going to use caveman talk, for example, just say, subject verb, like let's say he picked rock, something like that, that would be a sentence made up of nothing but action or active words. So those are non-glue words. However, in proper English, we would of course say he picked up the rock. Well, up and the are an example of glue words. They're necessary for us to get our head wrapped around the structure of the sentence, but they don't really have a lot of meaning to us. So you could still get the gist of the sentence if we were using caveman English, but it essentially helps us to understand the structure and things like that. The problem is that a lot of times we have a tendency to overuse these glue words. So it actually makes the sentence a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And that is what makes a sticky sentence. So if you see here, I do have a sticky sentence in this example in which I have 14 out of my 19 words are glue words. 73.7% of this sentence is glue words. And you can see my list of glue words here. Now, once upon a time, we had to tell you guys, well, in that case, you want to just look at the sentence, try to figure out what you're saying and see if there is a simpler way to say it. No longer, however, because we now have the rephrase tool, and rephrase is wonderful. It is based on it is based on GPT-3. So in this case, we do want to note that your data in this case is being handled by OpenAI. This is the only scenario in which your data is going outside of ProWritingAid. So it is only if you are using rephrase. If you are uncomfortable with your data going to OpenAI, because of course, like any other GPT-3 based tool, we do have to send it to OpenAI to process and get these results back. But if you're uncomfortable with that, you can disable rephrase at any time. Other than that, we are totally private. We do not make any claims to use your writing to train our algorithms. We get all of our suggestions from professional editors. So that is unlike some of our competitors. You have all the rights to your writing. We claim nothing. On top of that, we do not have data persistence, except in the case of saving documents to the web editor. So if you are using one of our browser extensions, if you are using Everywhere, anything that you check with those extensions goes to our servers, it gets tagged, the tags come back to you in the form of these highlights, and then basically the data is gone. We don't have it persist on our server. We do have it some persistence in case of saving documents to our servers in the web editor, because of course we have to be able to serve those documents back to you if you want to be able to pick up and start editing again. So that is the only case that we have data persistence. So just to be very clear, we take privacy and security very, very seriously. All of our servers are Microsoft Azure. We are currently in the Western United States for most of our servers. I do believe we may have just added some European-based servers as well. And if those have not already been added, they are coming soon. So we're going to have those based both in the US and in the European Union. Again, taking privacy and security very seriously. We use bank level encryption, web editor, and the only time your data goes outside of ProWritingAid is if you are using Rephrase. And again, that is because it is a GPT-3 based tool. We have to have OpenAI involved. If you would prefer to opt out, you can. So with that spiel being done on privacy and security and Rephrase, I am going to go ahead and show you guys the magic of the Rephrase tool here, because it is super, super cool. It's something our company's been really, really excited about. So if I hit suggest rephrases, then I am going to get a lot of different possibilities for how I might rephrase this sentence. So let's see, for those on the board who want to get into detail week by, I might simply say a week by week timeline is available here. That might be a lot easier, and that will get me out of having that as a sticky sentence. If I rerun the sticky sentence report, you can see that's no longer highlighted. I no longer have that as a sticky sentence. So that is one use of our rephrase tool. Now, if you want to see this really in action, I'm going to quickly pop back to our real-time editor and show you guys how the full rephrase tool actually works. So in this case, actually, let me pop over to sentence length really quick, because this is a great example of how rephrasing can help you. If you have very, very long sentences, so in this case, you can see I have got a few that are above that 30-word mark, which is what we consider a very long sentence. It's a lot harder for your reader to understand. So you can see it's highlighted here, this is a long sentence, and this is a long sentence here. Now, if I wanted to correct that traditionally in the past, I would have to sit down and do the same thing I would have to do with the readability report, would just sit and rack my brain on how I could rewrite that sentence and still get the same concept across. But if I go to rephrase, which again, going to pop on the real-time checker here, I am going to highlight that sentence that I know is a longer sentence, and I am going to click this rephrase button to show you guys the full rephrase tool. And you can see, this if my rephrase will stay up for me really quick. Just going to go with standard here. You can see I start getting different ways to say this sentence. So in this case, we do have 7 different modes. We have standard, which is just going to be focused on providing new variations of the same sentence. It's not going to have any particular focus on improving any one aspect of that sentence. It's just going to give you a variety of different language or different vocabulary you can use. We have fluency, which is directed at non-native speakers. And also, fun fact about rephrase, we can translate to English from most other languages. So for ESL speakers, basically, if you ever get stuck and you can remember the word in your native language or remember the phrase in your native language, but you can't remember it in English, write it in your native language, highlight it, click rephrase, and rephrase will rephrase it for you in English. So this is a really cool one. Unfortunately, I don't have a good example to show you guys today, but again, that translation is possible. So if you're stuck, just explore that at any time. But this fluency tool is dedicated kind of more to ESL speakers because it is focusing on transitions and focusing on basically the flow of your writing. However, if you're a native speaker, you can still get use out of that fluency tool because we all sometimes write paragraphs that we find are super, super choppy and we're just not sure why. So you can go through and highlight some of those sentences and basically say, okay, great, let me find a way to improve these transitions and improve the flow. And hopefully after rephrasing a few of those sentences in your paragraph, you'll find that the overall paragraph does flow better. Formal, as it would suggest, again, you're making your writing more formal. Informal is to make your writing more conversational. Sensory, for you guys as business writers, I doubt this is going to be as important. This is more directed towards our creative writers that need to add immersive sensory details into their descriptions and things like that. And then we have shorten, which, as it suggests, will shorten your sentence, and expand, which will actually expand out your sentence and make it longer. So in this case, I'm going to use that shorten tool because I am trying to get a very long sentence down to a shorter length. And in this case, I'm just going to bring up a few moments. So I can see here, maybe the VITT note for more info about the template rollout over the next few weeks. That might be an appropriate suggestion and appropriate swap for that sentence. In this case, I do always suggest that everyone take a good look at the rephrases and ensure that they match what you were trying to say originally, because we are not yet at AI is not yet at a point where it knows exactly what you're trying to say with any single sentence. It is giving its best guesses. And sometimes that may take information out that you still feel is vital. So again, take these sometimes with a grain of salt and feel free also to use them as inspiration. If you're simply stuck on how to shorten a sentence and you look through all of these options and you go, you know what, none of these really work perfectly, you might sit here and say, but you know what, I could say then on 325, there's a note on VITT that for PowerPoint specific info on OI for the template rollout. And that might get exactly what I was trying to say across in that sentence as well. So you can basically just click through and make those substitution. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. But again, just remember, you don't have to use rephrase exactly as is. You can basically combine a lot of these options. You might say, I like this sentence structure. I happen to like this word that was suggested, and I want to include this, this, and this information. And then you can rewrite the sentence yourself using that as inspiration for how to improve your sentence. So that's what we always tell folks, is that if they are concerned about AI making their voice sound funny or anything like that, then just use it as inspiration, combine it so you can be sure that it remains in your voice. Alrighty, so that does cover our sticky sentences style and our readability report, and then rephrasing, which again, like I said, very, very exciting tool, basically has done a lot to help writers write better and doing it faster. From here, I'm going to go ahead and quickly cover our style guides because we do have a few minutes left. So our style guides are basically a great tool if you are a company that does have an in-house style guide that you can use to create custom rules that you can share with your entire team. So in this case, these rules will pop up across your team. If you do have a team, you can see down here, we have the ProWritingAid team down here. I'm going to use some of my suggestions in my personal style guide just to show you guys a little bit, as I am not the manager of our ProWritingAid team. So just to show you a quick and easy find and replace option, we're going to use this example in which a company is wanting to refer to their customers, instead of as customers, refer to them as users. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and type in a wrong sentence up at the top here. So we've spoken to the customers. Then I'm going to say what word I need to match that is incorrect. So you can see I've put in match customers here. And then I'm going to put in what I need to replace that word with. So this is saying instead of customers, please say users. And then I have a message in which I can say, you know, our company is always referring to our buyers as users rather than customers. So this is just a quick little made up example of a way that you could do this quick find and replace. So I'm going to go ahead and test that rule. So you can see here, I've got the rule is to replace customers and instead suggest users. Okay, great. We're going to pop this over into my document here and show you guys how that works. I copy and paste that there. Then you can see I've got that yellow suggestion. There is my message that I originally put in. And instead of customers highlighted there, I need to refer to as users. If I click that, it automatically makes that substitution. So that's a very, very simple style guide rule. And these can get incredibly complicated. There is a essentially programming language called parts of speech tags or POS tags that essentially break down language into all of its component parts. And this is a big thing that our NLP team does because we do consulting on how to add style guide rules to your style guides and ProWritingAid. So if you have a company style guide that you're interested in having someone do that for you, the NLP team would be happy to help and consult on how to get those added so you can have those together for your team. But I am just going to show you a slightly more complicated rule. This isn't going to be nearly as complicated as, say, something like the Oxford comma, but it's a little bit more powerful than just our find and replace. So here we did have a customer that wanted to replace good and bad reagents with either appropriate or inappropriate, because good or bad in their minds was making a moral judgment on the reagent whenever they just needed to make a judgment on was this the correct reagent to use or not. So my wrong sentence is a variety of good reagents. And then I am going to make this match. So what I am saying here with these parentheses is I'm going to say match it if this sentence says a variety of good reagents, or match the sentence if it says a variety of bad reagents. So if I had a variety of bad reagents here, it would still make that match. Then from there, I'm going to actually make a suggestion for two possible replacements. I am going to say appropriate in this one here. This is a tagging process, that parts of speech tag. So you can see here, everything is basically assigned a number based on a scale of starting at 0. So in this case, good reagents, you would have $0 being good, $1 being reagents. So what it's making the suggestion here is it's saying appropriate reagents, because that is what is here at this tagged portion. Then this @ sign is going to say, and also suggest inappropriate, again, reagents. So here, again, that $1 is just that tagging for that reagents rule. So I would suggest appropriate or inappropriate. And then my message is please use appropriate or inappropriate. Go and test that rule. Looks like I have those suggestions there. Pop those in, give the real-time checker a moment. Then you can see, please use appropriate or inappropriate. I have appropriate reagents available to select here. I have inappropriate reagents available to select here. If I go ahead and change that sentence up and instead use bad reagents, you can see again, I'm going to get the same suggestion. So I click there for inappropriate and click there for appropriate. So that's just a good basic example of what you can use the style guide for, and basically kind of the power of these custom rules. Again, if you have a super complicated style guide, our NLP team is more than happy to help you get that into your ProWritingAid team. All right, so that wraps it up for us for the walkthrough for today. And it does look like we have some questions in the Q&A, so I will go ahead and take a look at those. Let's see, days, rephrase. Okay, our first question is rephrase on GPT-3 or GPT 3.5. All right, I am going to be honest. I am afraid our devs would be better suited to answer this question. As far as I know, it is on GPT-3. I am not sure if we have had an update to that as of yet. I'll double check with the devs and see if I can send that over to get that corrected if it is not GPT-3. But thank you for that question on there. That's something I would definitely want to double check. Documentation on creating non-trivial style guides. So we do actually have a couple of articles if you are looking to create more complex rules. We do have a couple of articles on our blog. Give me just a moment to find them. It has been just a touch of time since I have sent those links out. Aha, here we go. So we do have a guide to simple style guide rules, and this is going to be more along the lines of that easy find and replace that I showed you guys. And then we have one that is more along the lines of advanced style guide rules. And those are going to be those more non-trivial, non-standard rules like you mentioned. So definitely take a look there. And that is some of our documentation on how to use those parts of speech tags, how to get some of those rules into your style guides as well. And again, if you need any other help, feel free to reach out to our team. Our NLP team can usually consult on a couple of rules and just help you get those set up. But if we need something like a full style guide set up, then it's much better to just, chat with the NLP team and see if we can get that worked out for getting that consulting done for you guys. All righty. So I think that may cover most of our questions. If you guys have another one, please go ahead and throw it in the Q&A right now. I'll give everybody just a second in case anybody's typing. But in that case, if we have answered everyone's questions, then we are going to go ahead and get you guys just a couple of minutes back in your day extra. I hope this was a great session for you guys. Again, if you want a slightly different presentation on this, feel free to join us at the end of the month with Tom, who will be presenting on our walkthrough. I'll be kind of co-hosting for that. I usually do the intro and make some commentary during the session, but most of the actual walkthrough Tom will be doing. And again, hopefully everybody now has their links. So we are at time, and I will go ahead and let you guys get back to your day. Thank you all for coming, and have a great rest of your day and a great rest